It's time for more prototype playtime! And thanks to ThreeA, I'm looking at a pre-production copy of their upcoming G1 Optimus Prime, a licensed third-party figure aimed for a third quarter 2017 release. Getting the main bullets out of the way, joint tolerances and etc. are likely to be tweaked between this piece and the final production version. I'm passing this figure along once I finish producing this video, and keeping with the common limitation of licensed third-party Transformers items, this is a giant action figure that does not turn into anything. It is, however, giant. Standing roughly 16 friggin' inches tall, this Ashley Wood-designed Optimus Prime shows considerably more deference to the source material than, for example, ThreeA's Zaku or Marvel Comics offerings. It's clear that there's a love for the original design, and its main stylization is that it's sort of Optimus Prime if he was a Shogun Warriors toy. An implied titanic stature via notably long and bulky legs. Other artistic licenses are the harsher angles, and as ThreeA tends to do, a full figure encompassing and weathered paint job. There's also a pile of die-cast, including 2 huge plates on the shins, and I think some more on the bottoms of the feet, which keeps this guy planted on the ground. While the paint job is subject to change, I think the weathering on this copy of the figure is a small but solid improvement over what I saw on ThreeA's Dark of the Moon Optimus Prime. There are still big patches of silver, but the placement feels much better. It's oriented more towards corners, and I haven't seen an errant streak that cries out, "This is actually just paint!" the way a few on Movie Optimus did. And yes, he is literally coated in paint, which provides the large Autobot with a pleasing metallic sheen. The colors are all quite solid, though I wonder how he'd look with an even brighter candy-like red. There's also some cool dirt caking on the tires. The tires are kind of rubberized, and they do spin, because I guess why not? And if you're someone who prefers an Optimus Prime with clean, truck detailless legs, the tire sections and gas cans can be magnetically removed. The canisters have some additional tabs around the magnets that help friction them in as well. Busting down this guy's articulation design, I think that the neck is a double barbell ball joint system with the neck clasped around either side, because there's a bit of this kind of motion at the base of the neck, and then much tighter, there is some ball socket style motion at the top of the neck. Unfortunately, on this copy, the neck keeps coming apart, because this thing ain't ready for production at all. But that aside, like, you can get this dude to look up, look down, tilt his head a little bit, and it all works with the lights going on inside of his head. It's just that I can't actually activate those lights in a way that'll show up with all this good lighting on, so you'll see that later on. His shoulders are attached via ball socket joints to the inside of his torso. So there is, again, these ball socket joints are super tight, but they're what allows for forward and backwards motion, as well as this kind of small-scale rotation. There is then a straight-up hinge built into the box of the shoulder, and that moves right there. So this allows for you to move the arm all the way outwards. His smokestacks don't really move, so if you do this, they'll bump into his helmet unless you have the arm pivoted back a little bit. Also, there is a butterfly joint that comes out of the torso so that you can have his arms crossed forward a little and it reveals some sculpted detail, all that, etc. The biceps are straight up ratchety-clickety swiveling, and then there is a double jointed elbow, which is also full of ratcheting goodness and also full of more revealed silver insides. These are also some of the best hands ThreeA has ever done on a robot, and it starts off with the ball-socketed wrist connection that leaves enough space for a lot of movement, and as you can see, the silver kind of box inside the red box is spring-loaded to move in and out with the wrist a little bit. That's kind of neat. As for the hand articulation in detail, the fingers are all posable. Everything is connected to the base via ball sockets, a big ball socket for the thumb and little ones for the fingers. One thing about this thumb is it's got a ball socket and then a hinge at the top of the stem, and then a hinge in the middle of the knuckle, so he can give a thumbs up. This was if you see my interview with Greg from ThreeA at TFCon, this is a very specific thing he wanted this toy to be able to do. As for the regular fingers, if you ball socket them out, there are 2 knuckles on each finger, and they are frigging tight. Since this is like a pre-production copy of the toy, I thought this is all going to be loose, because I was told that tolerances will need to be tweaked. If anything, these tolerances are maybe a little too tight out of the box. Like, I was able to get all this straightened out, but it felt scary. I think it was just a little bit paint stuck. And now the tolerance actually feels great. Like, maybe if at the factory these could all be uncurled and recurled like twice to break the seals a little bit. The thing that makes me kind of happy, number one, the fingers are all very slightly different lengths. Not enough to be like really discernible, which I would have adored, but it is a great step in the right direction. Also, there's just a touch of spread, just a little bit, but that also makes me real pleased. Before we head below the belt, there's also some workings in the torso. Right above his stomach there is, I think, just a straight up left-right swivel. I have not detected any ball socketability here. However, below, right where the waist is connected, this is a swivelable and tiltable, I think, ball socket connection. And then the cool thing is there's also some ab crunch power going on. And I'm trying to figure out a way to show you precisely what happens here. When you tilt this down, it's kind of like the back extends up and reveals this bit of red here, and then you can't just simply tilt it back. You also have to kind of push this in and down when you tilt it back. So it's like this, and then it sucks back into the back of his underpants. That's kind of cool. Let's talk robot hips. The skirt has got 2 fold-up bits in the front and 2 fold-up bits on the sides to reveal these hip joints in here and make way for them. Now, at first glance, this is just a big ball socket joint. There's also a ratcheted thigh swivel, and the ball socket joint itself has a little bit of inwards-outwards, and it can go forward a bit, it can go out a little bit, and I was like, what's going on here? And then I realized this guy actually has a kind of Super Robot Shogoken-style system where the stalk of the ball socket joint can click down, you know, all Fig Arts style. See? You see what's going on there? That's a super heavy joint. And tilting it down allows you to have the room to kick this up 90 degrees. So that there's enough room for his big thighs to fit underneath the skirt. So his legs, they aren't, like, the hip joints are not super duper posable, but they get the job done thanks to those extending joints. So that's almost entirely just to get his legs out of his skirt. This thing fell off again. Hopefully the tolerances on this thing will be a little bit more solid, because the one on this leg falls off a lot, the one on this leg not nearly as much. So that's something that should, I hope, get fixed in production. And if you're watching this, fix it. As for knee articulation, this guy, again, it's kind of like Super Robot Shogoken style stuff. He's got a double jointed knee, it's all clickety, and then as you might notice, this door kind of sinks in to make room for the rest of the knee curl, so his thigh kind of goes into his calf a little bit, and like that's a tight knee curl, and it feels really good because there's like super heavy click on the bottom and slightly smoother slide on the top. Like the top joint is more of a buttery ratchet, and this one's more of a clickety ratchet. Just feels great overall. Plus the clicky outward thighs, the ball socket things, if you've extended them down so he can kick forward. The amount of posability you get here is what I would call enough. You know, it's not like super heavy posable, but for just an Optimus Prime, it's able to accomplish the basics without feeling like I'm fighting against its own systems. And that brings us to the foots. It's a ball socket connection, so you get left and right swivel, you get forward and backward, toe tap, you get ankle tilt. It's all gravy, baby, and there's a kind of sculpted block up in there, which keeps things looking nice, even if you have things tilted up. And then there is a ratcheted toe joint, which feels super solid, and it's fantastic for walking poses. Also, if you really want to get down and into it, the boot soles have got all of this sculpting that looks really cool, and it's real easy to not see. And it's all gunmetal, so if it does start to get scratched up and stuff, it's sort of in character and will self-weather, I guess. That's a really positive spin to put on it. But yeah, articulation-wise, this guy feels, especially if you take into account the notion that his tolerances will be perfected for mass production, and I sure hope they will be, he feels like a big, solid robot toy who also happens to be 16 inches tall. But I don't feel worried about just plunking him down and doing stuff. You know, like, it's too big for my lights. But you can just swack him into a pose and then, you know, light that pose. Ta-da! But he's able to look pretty cool, and I think that for the state he's in, the joints hold a lot of tactile hand feel promise. Optimus has light-up gimmicks, and they require 8 LR44 batteries in total to fully operate, and I am so pleased to see that no unscrewing is required to access the compartments. You just have to remove the backpack, pop a panel off the back of one shoulder, and open a hatch on the gun. Anyway, the main light-up feature is activated by the big slider switch on Prime's back. This turns on both his eyes and his matrix cavity, which project 2 different pale colors. What takes this up another level is the fact that the matrix cavity has its own sub-switch and can turn on or off by simply pressing on the center spot. This adds one more notch in that this also helps to eject the matrix, kind of like ejecting an SD card. All in all, a great take on the Matrix Chamber gimmick, which falls slightly short at the very end when you see that the ThreeA Matrix of Leadership is, well, it's kind of flat. I'm missing a notable amount of Z-axis mass here. Also, like many other high-end toy matrices before, the handles are simply too small for Prime to believably hold on to. Now, the gun attaches to a tab slot connection in Prime's palm, and if these fingers stay as effing tight as they are on this pre-production piece, that firearm isn't going anywhere until you want it removed. It's got a very clever click switch hidden on its design, which activates a light inside the barrel. The light's orange, so Prime is shooting hero lasers. But what about the 2 batteries you put into that one shoulder? Well, the attached smokestack is another cleverly hidden click switch, which activates a white light behind the insignia. That is a cute idea, to be sure. Oh, by the way, another one of those usual disclaimers. These lights are probably showing up way more dimly on camera than they would look to your own human eyes. ThreeA Prime also includes an energy axe with a design that looks like its non-translucent parts would fictionally retract and compress together. You attach it to the ball joint of either of the wrists, which means popping a hand off. It doesn't feel so much scary as it does feel right on the cusp of scary. But hey, waterfall axe fight ahoy! Finally, there are 2 detented jetpack pipes on Prime's backpack. I tried to flip them up as shoulder cannons and they don't seem to go quite far enough. Is this a little superfluous? Absolutely. But hey, I guess he kept Sideswipe's jetpack and built it into himself or something. The big highlight of ThreeA's G1 Optimus is the fact that this company has taken yet another step away from ball-jointed art vinyl fare and one more hop in the direction of properly solid super robot action figures. It's my understanding that folks working on this piece very directly wanted that to be the case, and I'm glad for it. I have very little to complain about on the basic playability front. And the electronics bring 2 particular joys to me. I mean, for sure, I've got a criticism or 2. While I would have liked to see the green bulbs along Prime's collarbone light up as well, I actually have no idea how you'd wire them to do so. And I don't know how entirely necessary a light-up shoulder insignia actually is. But man, all the activation switches are solid, often clicky, and fully hidden within the sculpt. ThreeA very much goes all over the place as far as using hidden switches versus simple switches that require the opening of the battery compartment. I hate opening up a toy to activate a feature. ThreeA Optimus does things the way I like to see them done in that regard, and I hope that this time this is the standard for this company going forward, because it's way more fun and way more interesting. But yeah, at the end of the day, the biggest hurdle on this piece is its price. ThreeA enjoy delivering gigantic robot toys with metric butt buckets of paint applied to every surface, and that's never going to be inexpensive. Add to that the simple fact of life that 99% of licensed third-party Transformers toys won't transform, and this is certainly a niche item. Hopefully the build quality follows through on what it looks like it's going to do in being strong enough to ensure that a purchase doesn't bring the baggage of needing to treat the toy like a museum piece, because I am always a fan of just being able to play with the toy when it also costs like $400. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelis. That's some prototype playtime. And yes, I am still kind of winging it as far as deciding what goes in this series versus the review series. This toy isn't even coming out this quarter, so I figured this is a better home for this piece of coverage.